We start light. It gets dark. Let's talk about it. Number 10, the hypnic jerk. You're falling asleep. You're almost there. Everything's going great. And then your entire body convulses like you just missed a step on a staircase, and now you're wide awake, heart going, staring at the ceiling, furious at nothing. That's called a hypnic jerk, also known as a sleep start, and it happens to somewhere between 60 and 70% of people regularly. It's one of the most universal things your body does, and somehow one of the least talked about. The leading explanation is that it's a glitch in the handoff between waking and sleeping. As your muscles begin to relax towards sleep, your brain briefly misreads the sudden drop in muscle tone as a sign that you're falling, and fires a corrective jolt before it realizes nothing is wrong, a false alarm triggered by the act of shutting down. There's a secondary theory that it's evolutionary, a reflex carried over from ancestors who slept in trees, where genuine muscle relaxation could mean an actual fall. The body developed a catch mechanism. Your brain still runs that mechanism even though you are in a bed, in a house, in no danger whatsoever. It hasn't updated, it just fires. Every time you try to sleep, there's a small chance your own nervous system panics and wakes you up for no reason. Number 9, earworms. There is a song stuck in your head right now, or there will be shortly, and there is essentially nothing you can do about it. An earworm, the technical term is involuntary musical imagery, or INMI, is a fragment of music that loops in your head without your consent and without a clear-off switch. Researcher James, who coined the term earworm in academic literature, estimated that nearly 99% of people experience them. A 2012 study by Elizabeth Helmuth Margulis found that the songs most likely to get stuck share specific features: a simple, slightly irregular melodic hook that the brain finds easy to predict but not quite predictable enough to complete satisfyingly. The loop forms because your auditory cortex keeps running the pattern, waiting for a resolution that doesn't come. The brain treats music as something to be completed. When a fragment ends on an unresolved phrase, the auditory system essentially keeps the file open. It's waiting for the rest never comes. So it starts again. Attempts to dislodge earworms have been studied seriously. Engaging with a mildly absorbing task, a puzzle, reading, something that occupies language processing, seems to help by redirecting the resources the loop is using. Chewing gum has been trialed with some modest evidence that the jaw movement interferes with inner speech and disrupts the cycle. You are not humming it yet, but you will be. Number 8, the doorway effect. You walk into a room and immediately forget why you went there. You stand in the middle of the kitchen, scanning slowly, hoping the room will remind you. It doesn't. You go back to where you started, and it comes back instantly. This has a name, the doorway effect, and it's been demonstrated in controlled conditions. Psychologist Gabriel Radvansky ran a series of experiments in which participants carried objects through a virtual environment, sometimes crossing through doorways and sometimes not. Crossing a doorway consistently produced more forgetting than traveling the same distance without one, even when the doorway itself was visually identical to the rest of the space. The explanation is that your brain uses physical boundaries to segment experience into what researchers call event files, discrete chunks of continuous activity. Walking through a doorway signals a context shift, and the brain archives the previous event file and opens a new one. Whatever you were holding in working memory for the previous context gets deprioritized, not deleted, just not actively maintained. Going back to the original room restores the original context, which is why the memory returns. You weren't losing the information. You were crossing into a filing system that had already moved on. Your house has been quietly partitioning your memory this entire time. Every doorway is a boundary. Every room is a different context. You have been walking in and out of your own mental file system for your whole life without knowing it had a structure. Number 7, the tip of the tongue phenomenon. You know this word. You absolutely know this word. It's right there. It starts with an S, or maybe a T. It has 3 syllables. You can picture the thing it describes perfectly. You've used this word before. It is not coming. Psychologists call this the tip of the tongue state, or TOT, and it's been studied since the 1960s when Roger Brown and David McNeil at Harvard first documented it experimentally. They induced the state by reading definitions of rare words and asking participants to name them. What they found was that people in a TOT state weren't simply drawing a blank. They had partial information. They could often correctly identify the first letter of the word, the number of syllables, sometimes words that sounded similar. The semantic content was there. The phonological retrieval had failed. The current understanding is that memory retrieval involves two separate processes, accessing meaning and accessing the sound of a word, and that these can decouple. You have the concept. You cannot reach the label. The more you try, the worse it gets, because effortful retrieval of incorrect alternatives can actually interfere with finding the right one. The word blocks itself. The most reliable solution is distraction. Stop trying. Do something else. The word tends to surface spontaneously, often minutes or hours later, when you've stopped actively searching. Your brain continues the retrieval in the background and delivers the result when it's ready. You are not in charge of when that happens. Number 6, highway hypnosis. You've been driving for 2 hours. You arrive, and you have no memory of the last 40 minutes. You were clearly functional. You changed lanes, you navigated, you didn't hit anything. But there's a gap. You weren't there. Highway hypnosis is what happens when a highly practiced, repetitive task gets handed off from conscious attention to automatic processing. The brain has two broad modes of operation for skilled tasks: controlled processing, which is slow, effortful, and conscious, and automatic processing, which is fast, efficient, and largely unconscious. Once driving becomes sufficiently automatic, which it does for most experienced drivers, the brain is capable of executing it without allocating conscious awareness to it. What's happening during the gap isn't sleep. Your reaction times are normal. Your responses to the road are appropriate. The car is being driven competently. You are simply not the one doing it in any meaningful experiential sense. The automatic system has taken the wheel, and the conscious mind has gone somewhere else, daydreaming, problem-solving, or simply idling. This is well within normal. Experienced pilots report it. Surgeons report it during routine procedures. Any sufficiently practiced task can trigger it. Here is the part that's worth sitting with. You cannot always tell, afterward, whether your conscious mind was present or absent. The automatic system leaves no obvious trace. The drive is completed. You remember arriving. The gap in between doesn't feel like a gap from the inside. It just feels like the last thing you remember was further back than expected. You have driven home without being home more than once. Number 5, intrusive thoughts. You're standing on a train platform and, completely unprompted, you think about jumping. You're holding a baby and you think about dropping it. You're in a meeting and an image arrives from nowhere that has nothing to do with anything, and you spend the rest of the meeting wondering what kind of person has a thought like that. A normal person. That's who has thoughts like that. Intrusive thoughts, unwanted, involuntary mental content that feels inconsistent with your values or intentions are experienced by approximately 94% of people, according to research published by Adam Radomski and colleagues in 2014, which surveyed populations across 13 countries. The content varies. Harm to others, harm to self, taboo scenarios, contamination fears. But the experience of having the thought arrive uninvited is nearly universal. The important distinction that clinical psychologists draw is between having the thought and engaging with it. The thought itself is neurological noise. The brain generates enormous volumes of content, most of which never reaches awareness, and occasionally something breaks through that the conscious mind finds disturbing. Having the intrusive thought is not evidence of desire or intent. It is evidence of a brain doing what brains do. What determines whether an intrusive thought becomes a problem is what happens next. For most people, the thought passes. For some, the distress generated by the thought triggers a suppression attempt, actively trying not to think about it, which, through a well-documented mechanism called the rebound effect, makes the thought occur more frequently. The harder you push it away, the louder it gets. Your brain generated it without your permission. It will not always leave on your schedule either. Number 4, microsleep. This one is harder to know about because it happens without your awareness. Microsleep is a brief involuntary episode of sleep, typically lasting between 1 and 30 seconds, that occurs while a person is awake, usually during states of drowsiness or fatigue. During a microsleep episode, the eyelids may droop or close partially, and brain activity shifts measurably towards sleep patterns. The person is, for that window, functionally asleep. They are not processing external input. They are not in control of their responses. Research by sleep scientist David Dingus and others has documented that microsleep episodes begin occurring after as little as 17 hours of continuous wakefulness, and that they become both more frequent and longer as sleep deprivation accumulates. Critically, subjects in these studies were often unaware they had experienced microsleep at all. They reported feeling continuously awake. The gap in consciousness wasn't perceptible from the inside. This is why sleep deprivation is considered a serious impairment in safety-critical environments. It's not that a tired driver feels asleep. It's that they can be asleep, actually measurably, neurologically asleep, while believing they are alert. The subjective sense of wakefulness is itself impaired by fatigue. You become a poor judge of your own consciousness exactly when it matters most. You have almost certainly experienced microsleep. You would not have known. That is not a reassuring sentence, but it is an accurate one. Number 3, jamais vu. You know of déjà vu, that eerie feeling that something familiar is happening again. Jamais vu is the reverse. Something you know perfectly well suddenly feels completely unfamiliar, strange, wrong, like you're encountering it for the first time. It most often happens with words. You're writing something and you write a word you've written 10,000 times, door, hand, and it stops looking like a word. It looks like a sequence of symbols that means nothing. You stare at it, you write it again. It looks worse. Psychologist Chris Moulin, who has studied Jamais vu extensively, ran an experiment in which participants were asked to write the word door 60 times in a row. More than 2/3 reported that the word began to feel strange, lose meaning, or seem like it wasn't a real word. This is called semantic satiation. The repeated activation of a concept eventually causes the neural response to that concept to temporarily dampen. The word stops triggering its associated meaning, it becomes noise. But jamais vu extends beyond words. People report it with faces. Looking at someone they know well and finding their features suddenly unrecognizable, assembled wrong, unfamiliar. They report it with places. A street they've walked every day for years suddenly feeling like somewhere they've never been. They report it with their own hands. The familiar becomes foreign without warning. The things you rely on most to feel oriented, words, faces, places, your own body, are not immune. Familiarity is a feeling your brain generates. It can stop generating it. You will not be consulted. Number 2, the feeling of being watched. You're alone. You know you're alone. And then the feeling arrives, low, certain, unannounced, that someone is behind you. You turn around, nothing. You were right the first time. You're alone. Right? The feeling of being watched has a name in the literature: hypervigilant social attention. And it is not random noise. It is a system that evolved specifically because failing to detect a genuine observer was, for most of human history, significantly more costly than a false alarm. The brain developed a threat detection mechanism tuned for social surveillance, other humans, predators, anything with eyes, and it is calibrated to overfire rather than underfire. Neuroscientist Susanne Kaiser and others have studied how the brain processes gaze detection, finding that the superior temporal sulcus is involved in reading the direction of others' attention, and that this system can activate on extremely minimal cues: peripheral shadows, sounds below conscious threshold, changes in ambient light. When there's enough low-level input to partially activate the system without enough resolution to confirm or deny a presence, the brain fills the gap with a felt sense of observation. In isolation, in darkness, or in states of anxiety, the threshold drops further. The system becomes more sensitive. A brain alone in a quiet house at night is a brain running its social surveillance system With reduced external input and heightened internal sensitivity, you felt watched because your brain decided the cost of being wrong in one direction was higher than the cost of being wrong in the other. It still makes that calculation every time, in the dark, in the quiet, when you're certain you're alone. Number 1, déjà vu. You've been here before. This exact moment, the angle of light, the thing someone just said, the specific configuration of everything around you, you've experienced this. You're certain. And you're also certain that can't be true. Déjà vu, French for already seen, is one of the most studied anomalies in memory research, and what researchers have found is that it is not a memory. It's a misfiring of the feeling of memory. Neuroscientist Akira O'Connor used fMRI to study déjà vu as it occurred in real time. What he found was unexpected. The regions most active during a déjà vu episode were not memory regions. They were frontal lobe regions associated with decision-making and conflict monitoring, the part of the brain that checks memories for accuracy. The current hypothesis is that déjà vu is a signal of that checking system working correctly. Something about a new experience shares enough structural features with an existing memory that familiarity is triggered erroneously, and the conflict monitoring system detects the mismatch and flags it. The strange doubling feeling is the brain noticing its own error in real time, which means déjà vu is not a glitch. It's a quality control signal. Your brain is telling you something felt familiar that shouldn't have, and I caught it. Here's what that means. In the moments when you do not experience déjà vu, in every ordinary moment of recognition and familiarity, that same checking system is running silently and finding nothing wrong. It is clearing your continuous experience as accurate, telling you that what you recognize, you genuinely remember, that the familiar is familiar for the right reasons. You trust that signal every moment of your life. It can misfire, and when it does, you feel it. But the rest of the time, all the times it runs clean, all the times it tells you the world is exactly what you remember, you feel nothing at all. You have no way of knowing how often it's right. That's all I got for today. Subscribe if you want more.